Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, where we'll be looking at how to navigate returns and fulfillment within the EU, UK, and VAT triggers that surround this. My name is Liam, and I'm going to be one of the hosts for today's webinar. I work within the business development and partnerships team here at SimplyVAT, and I'm going to be talking through everyone's favorite topic today, which will be VAT. However, before we kind of launch into all of this, I would like to introduce my co-host, Mark, who is coming from Ezi Returns.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's actually our first webinar, so please excuse any little glitches we may encounter, but hopefully we'll explain how making international returns and fulfillment easier will benefit your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, just to run through some housekeeping rules before we kick off, we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar in the comment section, and we will aim to answer like all of them towards the end. If we don't get enough time to answer your question, however, we will do some follow-ups following the webinar today, just so that we can discuss these further with you. And we will be looking at, in today's session, kind of the UK VAT compliance, post-Brexit VAT changes, expansion to UK EU, the returns management, and UK and EU fulfillment options. And we're going to start kicking off with Mark and Ezi Returns, looking at the fulfillment and returns.
Okay, thanks, Liam. So yeah, we run the business called Ezi Returns. We've been doing this for 8 years. We come from a e-commerce and retail background ourselves. And we were involved at the time when e-commerce was really expanding internationally. So we really hopefully we know and understand all the pain points and barriers to selling internationally, and especially when it comes to returns, what can go wrong, what you need to find out, what you need to do to make the whole journey better for your customers and for your business. So we'll concentrate on the two main areas today that we can potentially help with and highlight some key areas to consider for the future, whether you use us or another provider in the future. So that's both on international returns and international fulfillment. So what we do, we provide a network of local return addresses in key countries with physical warehouses where you can act as a local returns address. So your customers have ordered something, you've spent a lot of time, obviously, for getting your website looking great, sourcing your products, listing your products on marketplaces, however you sell. And inevitably, some people want to return the goods for whatever reasons. And we've been there before. Like I said, you send something out and a customer wants to return something cross-border, it can get messy, especially since Brexit, with shipping, with customs, and just general timescales and potential problems that can arise. So what we do, we remove a lot of those barriers by providing a local returns address and various other services to receive those returns locally, process them, and then often we would consolidate them and ship them back to you in bulk, which is where we save you and your end consumers a lot of money instead of using a more traditional method like using individual courier labels to get returns back. So when do we get the returns arrived with us? And by the way, they can arrive by any method. You could use your own labels. You can use marketplace labels such as Zalando or Amazon, for example, or you can get the customer to self-post. We'll come to that later. Or you can use our labels. We'll receive the returns and accept them by any method. We'll then process them within 1 to 2 working days. And that means that you can log into your returns management portal, see the returns, see who they're from, when they arrived, etc., and process the refund or exchange or whatever you need to do for your customer. So what that means is the customers get their refunds and their returns and exchanges processed much quicker. The customers are also much happier to return or to buy from you in the first place, knowing that they can actually return locally as well. Alternatives to having the goods shipped back to you, we can include other options. So if for whatever reason you don't want the goods back, if cost effective or particularly complicated, we can offer other solutions in the local countries or regions. We can offer liquidation, resell, where we actually grade returns and make them available for resale locally, and also disposal or donation, in some locations under certain rules as well. On this slide here, what you're seeing now is an example of different services that we offer, just to give you an example of what we can do. We deal with a wide range of sellers, products and categories, ranging from the cheap and cheerful sort of end of the market through to sort of high-end luxury goods. And we have developed a range of services to hopefully cater for most of those needs. Our most popular service, for example, is our Standard Plus service, where we receive a package, we'll record a tracking info in the order or invoice or RMA number, for example, the customer's name, and then we'll open the package and scan the item barcodes or other information to those products. And this is a really key part to it. Having that level of service means that we can, verify to you that what you're expecting is actually in that package. So we help reduce buyer fraud when it comes to returns. Okay, most people are honest, but obviously not everyone is. So if you're expecting 2 items back, we record there's 2 items. If you're expecting a medium and a large back and the customer only sends the medium, that will be recorded. So it helps with a much more accurate return process much sooner than if they were posting them back internationally. Our other services include, if you just go back to the previous slide, sorry, Liam, just one there, so yeah, thank you. Our other services include a grading service where we inspect the goods to see if they've been worn or damaged or defective in any way, and to see if they're resellable. And we give them a grade and we give them a supporting note if there's any issues that we've encountered. And that's very popular with higher end footwear and fashion, for example, as you can imagine, where people have bought a pair of shoes, worn them for the night out and tries to return them. So that sort of thing, again, can help prevent buyer fraud. And we also offer photo services as well. So if you want to see for your own eyes the state of the goods, then we can take, any number of photos needed to suit whatever your products need. So we have quite a range of services. There are a few other custom services we do, such as electronic testing and things like that as well for those sort of product categories. The main thing is we'll process those goods quickly, we'll consolidate them, ship them back cost effectively to you in bulk, and we really don't mind whether you have 1 return a week or 500 a day. It's we can cope with any sort of scale. Okay, next slide, and please, William. Yeah, okay. So as an example here, we're offering return services in sort of a lot of main EU marketplaces. We have physical hubs in all these locations here across Europe and UK, and in the rest of the world we cover USA, Canada, Mexico, North America, UAE, Australia and New Zealand, and a few new countries coming on very shortly. So we can offer, the benefit to this is that we can offer fulfillment through these warehouses as well, through some of them, which we'll come on to in a minute, returns. And one of the big moves in our industry, we see a big move, changing from shipping stuff backwards and forwards across the world multiple times, is we're offering more and more and trying to find more and more local solutions to resell, liquidate, donate, or recycle products instead of shipping them back if that's not feasible for whatever reason. So cost-effective, environmentally effective reasons for that pushing our market as well is driving that forwards at the moment. In some EU countries where we don't have a physical warehouse, we do have a label portal. A label portal is a really smart piece of kit where you or your customers can go register the return. It loads in the local language, can be branded, can be customized, and to suit your returns policy for free returns or customer pays or a bit of both, whatever suits your returns policy. And so we cover the whole of Europe with either physical addresses or returns labels. Okay, well, just going to share my screen briefly just to show you a slide that we forgot to actually put into the presentation. Like I said, it is our first one, so bear me with one second. And we'll, excuse me. No, I'll stop sharing that. That's gone wrong. Sorry, apologies for that. If you just pop the slides up again, please, Liam, that'd be good. Thank you. Yeah, so to sort of summarize really the benefits of using an international returns solution instead of trying to use courier direct labels, really, cost saving is one of them. the cost of shipping a return domestically within France, within Germany, for example, or within the UK is much cheaper than letting your customer wander off to the post office and posting it themselves. We encountered this when we were selling online. They buy a €40 product, they go to the post office, they insure it, they pay for the next day service and all that sort of thing, and the postage costs, more than the profit you made on the product. So we've had all that sort of thing happen to us. So you can control your cost by knowing what the label costs are, knowing what the process and shipping costs are with us in bulk. You can also be assured that a lot of customers will research the returns policy of a seller before they choose to buy. And there's been a lot of research done on this. It's well over 60% of people actually do research the returns policy of a seller. And if they can see they can return in France or Germany, as an example, they're much happier to buy. So we have a lot of sellers feedback to us that they see an increase in sales once they get a local returns address publicized or available. And there's a cost effective, there's also a more sustainable approach to returns. Like I say, we do have other options, but shipping the items back to you in bulk means it's a much more environmentally friendly way of shipping back. And also from an admin point of view, less hassle with customs. If we're shipping from the UK to the EU, slightly different, and we'll talk about VAT and customs maybe a little bit later in questions that will come up, I'm sure. If we're shipping from EU to UK, the UK has a pretty good scheme that we use to get your goods back exempt of tax and duties as a return good coming back into the UK. So we handle all that side of it for UK sellers very easily, and for a number of countries that works, not all countries. It's a bit more burdensome in other countries. So that sort of sums up our returns offering and some of the benefits really to using that sort of service. The other thing to think about, and this really sort of has come about largely in Europe and UK since Brexit, obviously, we had a lot of inquiries for people looking for alternatives to shipping the goods direct between the two regions, between the UK and Europe and vice versa. So outsourcing your fulfillment, we can offer direct to consumer, B2C, order picking, packing and shipping. B2B, which is business to business, so we can supply your retail stores if you have a retail presence, or typically we do a lot of work with Amazon. We're an Amazon approved partner, and we can prepare shipments, boxes, pallets, etc., to go into FBA and drip feed stock into your Amazon FBA stock as and when needed. The resells is the name we give to the fulfillment of graded returns that are resellable. So if we're receiving returns and we grade them A, the product and packaging is all looking great, we'll put that on the shelf, make it available. You can relist, resell that, and we'll fulfill it locally within the EU. Or if you're in the EU using our UK service, we can fulfill it within the UK. And this is where our collaboration with SimplyVAT comes in. There are implications, obviously, on VAT and other taxes in different countries and different regions that you need to adhere to and comply to. So next slide, please, Liam. Great, thank you. So typically, I'm sure most of you know how fulfillment works, but we'll just briefly go through this. First thing we do is we'll connect to your web store or your system where all your orders and your inventory are all being managed and housed. So whether that's Amazon and Shopify, whether it's a whole system like Channel Advisor or Limworks or something like that, we can connect to that to allow the automatic feeding of orders to come through from your marketplaces and website into our fulfillment software. The inventory would be live and updated regularly. As we pick and pack and ship the orders, the status of the orders is updated, along with the tracking information is sent back. So the whole process is highly automated, and your customers having a locally fulfilled order will hopefully receive their products quicker and cheaper than if you were shipping cross-border. So there's a lot of advantages to outsourcing your fulfillment. Obviously, you do lose a little bit of control, but it does allow you to free up time to concentrate on other parts of your business if someone else is handling the staff, the premises, the warehouses, the shipping, the couriers, and all that goes with all the things you're very familiar with. So in terms of benefits, we've got to go to the next slide, please, Liam. That'd be great, thank you. Outsourcing your fulfillment is cost effective. Quite often we can do a cost saving for you rather than you shipping your goods from one region cross-border into another. If we're housing your stock, we can fulfill locally in the final mile shipping, usually in a more cost-effective way. The efficiency, sending your stock cross-border. So if you're a UK seller sending into the EU, you can send bulk shipments of stock in with one customs clearance, etc., easing the burden on customs clearance and the duties and everything else you have to pay there, as well as administer. So that can also help. The customer satisfaction side of things, like I said, if a customer is receiving their order next day or within 2 days rather than 3 to 4, obviously everyone's happier. Scalability. We can scale our operation to suit your business. So if you're a new startup and you experience some good growth, we can grow with you. The warehouse side of things and storage is our problem, not yours. If you're a highly seasonal business, again, we can cope with the seasonal demands of your business. You won't have the fixed cost of a big warehouse if you're only using all of it for a third of the year, for example. Your storage cost, for example, will be charged according to how much stuff you have with us, not to how much of your building costs. And fulfilling locally on the environmental side as well is, generally speaking, a much more sustainable way to move forwards. And there are many initiatives such as sustainable packaging and things like that, which we're all coming into our industry that we're all taking care of. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview on returns and fulfillment. We offer both of those as independent standalone services within Ezi Returns. You can use us in one country, all countries, various regions. And like I said before, the scale of your business is not a problem. If you're a new seller, you can register with us and you don't start paying anything until you start receiving returns. If you're a high volume seller, we'll talk to you about the best way to ship your products, the best way to process your products. We can be quite flexible on that. Okay, I think that's everything from me. Liam?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. That was really interesting. Obviously, on the back end of looking at fulfillment, as Mark just mentioned, we need to also consider kind of like the VAT implications on the back of that. So the VAT registrations that we'll be looking into today is going to be the import one-stop shop registration, the one-stop shop registration, UK VAT, and a local registration in the EU for any local kind of fulfillment needs. So what we're first going to look at is just what kind of triggers a requirement for VAT registration. So each country kind of has its different rules that surround kind of triggers of a VAT registration requirement, but there are some rules that are very standard and don't tend to differ around kind of the EU or UK, for example, either. So the main ones are if you're holding stock in a member state for B2C EU-wide sales and fulfillment, if you're doing DDP supplies to EU customers from an outside of EU location, direct to consumer, or acting as the importer of record on B2B supplies. And by DDP, we mean kind of collecting those VAT, so just instead of pushing it towards that end consumer. The other side, however, is that if you're holding stock kind of outside of the EU, you don't need to collect VAT on any of those supplies, which I'm just going to go into a bit more detail now. So in the EU, there is no threshold for a VAT registration. So if you're holding stock locally in a member state, unless you're an EU business, so this is mainly just for non-EU businesses, but there is no kind of threshold for a registration there. So you'll be required to register from the first taxable transaction made to the EU. If the goods, as mentioned previously, are not located in the EU at point of sale, such as you are fulfilling from a UK fulfillment location into the EU, then you don't require to collect VAT on that transaction as long as you're sending the goods with a DAP Incoterm, which means delivered at place, where the client kind of pays all the VAT on the supplies once they land in the member state of arrival. So the main kind of important questions to really ask yourself is, where the taxable liability lies, is what is the precise nature of that taxable transaction? Is it kind of a goods or a service? Is your client a business or a consumer? Where are the goods delivered to and from? And who needs to account for the VAT, kind of the customer or the supplier? Once you're able to kind of answer those questions, you're able to really come up and look at where you're looking into getting your VAT registration. You know, for example, if I was to say, okay, my client's a consumer, I need to look at where my goods are going from. If they're going from the UK, can I send them without VAT collected? Or if they're going from the EU, can I send them with kind of VAT collected, all that kind of stuff. So moving on to the next kind of registration we're going to look at. The Import One Stop Shop registration is a very popular scheme and registration for smaller businesses that aren't established within the EU. And it allows you to kind of collect that VAT on smaller supplies. So as it mentions there, just like it's an optional scheme to avoid having to register for VAT in all countries of destination of the goods. Is to report VAT due on distant sales of the goods sent from an outside EU location to the EU with a consignment value up to €150. It allows businesses, inclusive of also marketplaces, to collect and report the VAT due on imported goods to consumers in a single return. So single registration, single return, which is really key. However, the other important thing is that non-EU traders, so if you're a UK business, you were required to have an IOS intermediary, which is someone like ourselves here at SimplyVAT. We act as that kind of intermediary on those registrations so we can get you registered for the IOS scheme. The main rules of using the IOS, as I mentioned, firstly, obviously there is that value cap of €150. The other thing is that once you're registered for IOS, all eligible sales must be accounted for in the IOS return. So one thing that we haven't really mentioned here, but obviously if you would like some further information on, please do feel free to reach out. It's Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland, when you're using IOS, if you're a UK business, for example, the Northern Irish sales need to be accounted for under the IOS registration and the IOS return, as when you're registered, it's deemed as an EU member state. So therefore, all eligible sales going through to Northern Ireland are required to be registered under that, rather than your UK VAT return as you would have accounted for it previously. The other rules are that you can't really deduct any VAT like you would on your current national VAT returns. So it's not ideal for kind of like, businesses who have purchases in local member states and all that kind of stuff. And as mentioned, single monthly return and payment per scheme. And when using the IOS, you must display, charge VAT and collect VAT at point of sale based on where your customer is located. So you need to account for each local kind of rate of VAT. In the EU, that does vary between member states, so it can range from 17 to 27% on the standard rating. And also your client, your goods to your consumers may be eligible for like also a reduced or a zero rated as well. So you do need to make sure that you are collecting and remitting that local rate that's appropriate for your supplies. The other important thing is that sales must be kept for 10 years. So you must keep all records of any sales made to the EU, just in case there's any audits or anything like that that's been issued through tax authorities. And they can, obviously, just following on from that, they can exchange information between tax authorities and they can make inquiries, which is, maybe apply penalties if required, if they believe you're using the scheme, incorrectly, or you're having sales there that aren't eligible. So just to really tie up there, what we've looked at with the IOS scheme and just looking at a very brief kind of case study, if I was a UK established business and I'm selling kind of home decor via my own website to customers in both in the UK and EU, and my products are retailed at around, £60 to £200 an item, they're selling to the EU customers and they are being charged extra fees at the border. So the three things that we need to look at there, are the three conditions for the IOS scheme met? So are they located outside the EU at point of sale? Yeah. Are they sold to private individuals? And are they not exceeding the 150 threshold? So if you look back at that, three of them are met, but some of their sales may go above that order. So, they can apply for the IOS scheme for the goods below that 150 threshold. and they can collect and remit that VAT on those sales. It looks like a lot of their items may fall under that threshold, which, it's really great, and it can really help improve that customer experience. The other side, however, is that if there is any sales that go above that 150 threshold, there are a couple of different options available. So as mentioned previously, you can always make the EU customer the importer of record, or you can register locally. For example, whenever I'm having a conversation with a client, I always like to look at particular markets that they may find the most beneficial. So if they're having a lot of sales within Germany, it may be good to register locally in Germany to account for any sales made to that kind of country and collect VAT on those supplies, and maybe, expand further into holding stock locally and utilizing the OSS if they do see a growth in those higher volumes, which we're about to discuss about the OSS now. So if we look into the OSS, there's a different version of the Import One-Stop Shop, which is called the Union One-Stop Shop, and it's for goods located inside the EU at point of checkout. So it's really beneficial if you're holding stock with, say, Ezi Returns in like a local member state and utilizing their B2C fulfillment options that they have. You would need a one-stop shop to account for these supplies, and it's registered in the member state of where you're holding your stock. So when you look at just the general kind of rules through it, as mentioned, it's to report all the VAT due on supplies kind of between one member state to another for B2C sales. Each member state have their own online portals for the Union One-Stop Shop. Non-EU businesses can use it, obviously, for the intra-EU distant sales of goods. So the name kind of throws people off because they think it's only eligible for member states. It's not. It's eligible for anyone, any country, any established business in another country that are holding their stock locally. And it works as an alternative to having to register in all member states where customers are located. And it's for B2C only, as mentioned as well. However, for this to apply, the goods do have to be in the EU. So you aren't able to kind of utilize it just for the fact that there's no kind of value threshold on those orders, which is another benefit to it, to the IELTS as well. But they have to be in the EU when they're actually sold. If we're looking at it in practice, you, as mentioned previously, you just register in the country where you're planning on holding stock. You use it to report all eligible supplies. It's a singular quarterly return and a single registration for all the sales. Similar to the IELTS, it's just on a quarterly basis. And you report all of that to the relevant member state of where you're registered. So, for example, if you are registered in the Netherlands or if you're registered in Germany, all the OSS kind of sales the VAT owed go to that member state, and then they distribute it amongst all of those other member states. So you don't have to worry about paying individual little payments. And again, you should keep the records for up to 10 years. Now, something that we find a bit common as well is if you're holding stock in a couple of different member states to utilize a lot of different fulfillment options and have stock locally to each part of like the EU, you only require to hold one-stop shop. It's just you aren't able to kind of report the local sales made in that other member state on that one-stop shop return. So you have to have both kind of registrations there as well. So just a very brief case study regarding the OSS, just to tile that up. As a UK established business, if they're looking to expand their business by holding stock in a German warehouse, they will bring the goods to Germany from the UK and they will sell exclusively on their own website. So the UK business will need to import the goods to Germany and pay import VAT and duties at the German border. They'll need to register for German VAT and obtain a German EORI number, which I'm going to go into very shortly. And they'll report the import and reclaim import VAT, report the sales via, that should say, own website, but it's via their own website, and also register for the Union OSS scheme in Germany because the goods are going to be going from Germany to other EU member states as well. So with this, as I mentioned there just briefly with the EORI, because we don't really have too much kind of to cover on that, but if you're familiar with kind of importing into the UK, maybe you would have heard of an EORI number, and that's needed to import goods to any country really, and it allows you to reclaim that import VAT. Without having that number, import VAT may not be reclaimable. So it's always important to obviously get one of those and register for it alongside your VAT number. So we're just going to look now into selling in the UK. So as we are all aware, as of January of 2021, the UK is no longer an EU member state, so the VAT rules kind of changed. So if you're holding inventory in the UK now, you do require a VAT registration, and there's a hard border now between the EU and UK, so therefore they're treated as imports and exports rather than intra-community movements. So if you're an EU business that previously traded in the UK, you may have been able to kind of move your goods freely, whereas now it triggers that VAT registration requirement and also the EORI number for the UK. Previously, before January 2021, there was no marketplace liability. Now, however, UK marketplaces such as Amazon, for example, are now liable for VAT collection on kind of certain transactions. So it does depend per marketplace, and it's always good to look at that kind of area with the marketplace you're looking at selling on, just to see whether they are going to act as that deemed supplier on those sales or whether they're going to push the end collection to yourselves. There is now also a £135 threshold put into place, which I'll go into a bit more in a moment, but it's there to basically allow you to sell goods into the UK below a certain threshold, but below that threshold, you do require to have VAT. So as I'm saying here as well, goods sold to the UK customers from outside the UK with a consignment value below that threshold of £135 should be collecting VAT and remitting it to the UK tax authorities on behalf of their consumer. If the supplier's goods are all valued above the threshold, so for example, if you're selling goods that are always going to be above £135 and the goods aren't going to be stored or located in the UK, then you can always push that VAT onto the end consumer under that GAP Incoterm, and the customer will remit all kind of VAT and pay that at the border when they go and collect their goods. And because I know that was a lot of information, and with VAT, obviously, there's always a few different things to really consider. So this will all be kind of sent out at the end of today's session as well. But just to tie up everything that we've kind of discussed about, we're going to look at two different case studies. One's going to be more so looking at the UK, and the other one's going to be looking at the EU. But first, we're going to start with kind of the UK. So if I'm an American company intending to kind of retain stock through Ezi Returns in the Netherlands for B2C sales across all EU member states, and also plan to market goods from the Netherlands into the UK with individual item values below £135, and the merchandise will be shipped also directly from China into the Netherlands for the distribution. For these operations, what the US company will need to do is require a Netherlands VAT number, an EORI number, and also the Union One-Stop Shop number within the Netherlands for all B2C sales kind of sold from the Netherlands to other member states. Because the goods are entering in the UK and they're priced below that 135 threshold, the company must also then require a UK VAT registration, as you will be obligated to remit VAT on these transactions. Looking at the other way, so for example, if we're a US company holding stock in the UK for B2C transactions and also looking to sell within the UK and looking at making sales to other EU member states, the anticipated order value would look to be below maybe £100, though some orders may obviously go above that amount also. And the bulk order will go directly into the UK first. So as similar to when the bulk order went into the EU, you're going to require a UK VAT number and the EORI number within the UK to import those goods. Given that the average order value remains below that €150 threshold for iOS, you don't necessarily need to get the iOS number. Obviously, it would be great it's great benefit to your customers. It allows kind of those easy kind of sales made, and it helps retain that customer service element as well. But you don't need to have that also on the same time. So you don't require to have the iOS, because when you ship from the UK to the EU. As mentioned at the start, you don't require to hold any VAT number as long as they're shipped under a DAP Incoterm. But if you are going to be making sales and you would like to account for that VAT, it sounds like the IELTS would be a great option here for that American client. And yeah, so that kind of comes to the end of my section here. What I will do is I am just going to, thank you firstly for listening to us. And we're going to have a look at some questions. I think we've had a few come in. So I think, Mark, I've got one for you here, firstly.
Yep. Okay.
So is your fulfillment price of £2.15 charged per unit shipped within an order, or is it per order? And that's coming from David.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an example price. So we would price it up usually on a per order, then a per item, then a per SKU type basis. So that would be typically for a pick and pack for one item would be packed for that sort of price. If your order profile is that you have quite a lot of orders with multiple items in, then the increased fee would just be a lot smaller than that. So it might be 30 or 40 pence or cents for each additional item in the same order. So it's very cost effective. But we can provide you with a proper quote if you want to get in contact with us.
Perfect. And also following on from that as well, I believe David asked a secondary question there of, does your fulfillment offering also include additional warehouse storage fees on top?
Yeah. Okay. So the storage is always a good question. It's and it's a complex one. We do what we call dynamic storage charging. Okay, which sounds really sexy and great, but it basically means that you only pay for storage that you use for most sellers. So if you wanted a fixed space in our warehouse all year round or certain parts of the year, we can do that. But typically we would charge you on either a per item basis or on a per location used, such as a pallet space or a bin, depending on your products, or a per item basis. So if we had 100 items in stock today and we sold 10 tomorrow and 10 the day after, your storage would actually decrease each day, and that will be calculated up in your monthly invoice. So it reflects what you actually hold in stock for us. So that's the fairest way we find for most customers to think about their storage fees.
Perfect. Okay, let's have a look and see whether there's any other questions.
There was one from Marcos. Sorry, I just noticed as well a couple. Yeah. Yes, we do, Marco. Sorry, we do provide labels in the whole of Europe and North America, Australia, and a few other countries. Those labels currently go back to our warehouses. We process them, and then we can arrange to consolidate those returns back to wherever you are based. And I think there was another question allied to that was someone said, I think it Mark again said, I'm not based in one of the locations listed. Can you still consolidate returns for me? Yes, we wherever you're based in the world, we have customers, we have retailers based out of South America, Asia, and Eastern Europe, wherever. So if you're based in Czech Republic, for example, we can deal with all your European returns and ship them to you in the Czech Republic. So there's all options are available.
Perfect. I think as well, I found a question here that for me. So how far in advance, Uvi is asking how far in advance should I be looking into the VAT when I'm exploring my fulfillment options, which is always a great question. I'm sure you can agree, Mark. Obviously, it takes a while to get set up in a few member states. So if we're looking at a lot of the countries available within mainland Europe, if you're looking at UK, France, and Germany, for example, the registration timeline is around 10 to 14 weeks in the UK and around 8 to 12 weeks in Germany and France. And they're really popular markets, for expansion to happen in to start off with. So with that, we would recommend kind of with those timelines touching base more so at the initial planning stages, or just considering kind of, even if you're having a very low thought of, should I start looking at holding stock in the EU, or should I explore this? Always explore your VAT options then, because sometimes, it may take a lot longer than you expect. And obviously we want to ensure that you can get your VAT registrations in time there as well. And also, I think that's a great question coming on from Marco as well, actually. if you're holding stock in kind of multiple member states, does this trigger a need for a VAT registration in each member state, or just use the one? You need a registration in each member state that you're holding stock in locally. So if you are going to be utilizing kind of, easy return solutions of fulfillment in a couple of different countries and also their returns options, you may require a VAT registration in each one where you're holding stock for distribution purposes. And yeah, I don't know. I think there might be one or two more. I'm just having a look through the question.
Yeah, just add to that bit about the timescales. You can certainly start that the talking to SimplyVAT about that process of getting registered in whichever countries you need to. From our point of view, we can get people set up returns within 24, 48 hours. With fulfillment takes a little bit longer, usually to get you integrated, to get your product database, to get all these things checked out and the orders tested and that sort of thing. Lead time is anything from 2 weeks to 4 weeks typically, but we can time that to coincide with when your VAT registration becomes effective. And I'd be ready to be corrected on this, Liam, but I think once you've started the application process, you probably would not get into trouble if you actually had stock in there before that number came through. But I'm happy to be corrected on that one.
So, I mean, that's a really great point, actually, because that is a question we do get faced with quite a lot here when we're having the initial kind of conversations with clients. You shouldn't have your stock held. So, for example, there are some countries where they're a lot stricter than others, but you shouldn't be holding stock in a member state, really, without having that VAT registration, mainly also because when you're moving stock in, if you don't have that EORI number, the difficulty comes with reclaiming that import VAT. So it becomes a bit more complex to reclaim and you might lose it. So therefore, we always recommend not holding stock until you start making sales. But sometimes, stuff's happened in previous kind of, lives where stock may already be in that country. And, it's always a conversation that we can have, depending on the particular setup with the client. But yeah, long-winded answer there, but we recommend not to, but obviously we can have discussions if you already have.
We've had people that have asked the same question after the stock has landed somewhere, even maybe not with us, and that's why we refer them to SimplyVAT with a better knowledge.
And I think we've just got one final question here, which looks like it could be for me, coming from David again. David's coming in with a great question today. So with regard to shipping orders to the EU under the IELTS terms, should you report those sales to Royal Mail or other couriers in euros, or is it being converted into pounds still okay? So that is actually a great question. So when it comes to the IELTS and your courier, you only actually need to give them your IELTS number. You don't require to give them any kind of, reporting or remitting those sales, because that actually gets remitted through us here at SimplyVAT or whoever you use as your intermediary to remit those sales to the, whatever tax office you kind of run through. For example, you can run it through like Ireland, or, each kind of intermediary will have their own intermediary license in an EU member state. So it gets remitted via that route. The only actual thing you need to report to your courier is your IELTS number, so that it's shown in customs that the goods have VAT collected on those supplies. And yeah, I think there are a couple of other questions, but when I'm looking at them, especially from our side, I think it's going to be great for us to have like individual conversations on these. So what I'm going to do is that me and Mark will sit together after this session's ended and look at how we can best outreach to the other questions there, just to make sure we're answering them correctly and aiding you with the support, because it looks like there could be some really great scope there for us to kind of work with those. And yeah, I think, did you have any other questions at all, Mark?
No, that's all fine for me. There's a couple of technical questions there about reclaiming, I think, VAT and duties, etc., on returned goods. It's a messy area. It's possible, and there are solutions coming onto the market to help you with that. But a question, it's a question for your accountant and a specialist like SimplyVAT to have an in-depth conversation about that. We can help provide some of the proof and information that you would need to provide for the re-import of goods back into the UK, for example, say you shipped a load of goods to Germany and you just send them back to the UK and reclaim that German VAT, for example, then we can provide the documentation and stuff to support that. But the accountant or your SimplyVAT person or contact there would be the best person to help you with that.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, that's what I mean. What I would do is if we kind of reach out following the webinar, it'd be great to have that discussion, because it is also going to be dependent on the member state, where the goods originated from, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really great question. Just unfortunately not one that has a simple answer, which you'll find quite a lot with VAT. But that's why, we're here to help with that ease of getting that VAT registration. And Mark and the team at Ezi Returns obviously there to help with getting those fulfillment options available for you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So from our point of view, if anybody wants to contact us and ask any questions, if anyone wants to see a demo of the customer-facing label portal, which makes the whole returns process for your customers slicker, as well as the back-end management of returns, and look at any of that, then please just contact us and we'll arrange a demo to suit you. Also, sorry, I almost forgot. We do have if you mention that you've spoken to SimplyVAT and you do end up signing up with us with SimplyVAT, there is an offer where you get 50% off your first 3 months account fees. So it's worth mentioning that if you do sign up as well.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone likes to save pennies, especially around this time of year when we're approaching that year end. So that's great. And yeah, well, I just wanted to really tie up and say thank you all for watching today's webinar. Obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either us or SimplyVAT using this email here of here-to-help@simplyvat.com. Or if you have any questions for Ezi Returns, feel free to touch base with them at info@ezireturns.com. But thank you so much for attending today. It's been great. I hope it's been really helpful and useful for you. And as we've mentioned, we'll follow up with those other questions shortly. And yeah, so thank you all. And I hope you have a lovely remainder of your day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.